Good morning, councillors and staff. If we could please stand forward, press. Almighty God, we acknowledge that we have a responsibility to look after your creation, especially this region we call Barcaldine Regional Council. We are conscious that our decisions are going to affect deeply the people we have come here to serve. Assist us to exercise respect for councillors, staff, and for the people of our region. Help us in this meeting to act wisely, justly, and intelligently in all our deliberations. Thank you, Lord, for the privilege of both leading and serving, and assist us to do these well. Amen. We have a lengthy condolence motion this morning. We'll observe a minute's silence to mark the passing of the late Mrs. Beth Peckett, Mr. Gordon Fraser, formerly of Alpha, Mrs. Mary Arthur, Mrs. Narelle Matthews, Mr. Gary Aitken and Mr. Paul Woods of Barcaldine, and Mr. Godfrey Tyndall and Mr. John Ballard of Munnabara.
Mr. Mayor, can I also add Mrs. Clarice Coleman?
And formerly of Barcaldine?
Formerly of Barcaldine. Of Barcaldine, she left.
Sorry, yes. Councillors and staff, I remiss me not to point out and to pass on behalf of all of you to Councillor Arthur our condolences for your immediate family member who is one of those, so to your unmarried condolences. Thank you. Right. We have apologies today from Samad. Samad is getting married this week. And so obviously is not here, but we'll be returning, we'll be back for our next meeting. I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land upon which we meet and their elders, both past, present and emerging. Declarations of prescribed conflict of interest, please, Councillor Peoples. I believe you have disclosed one.
Mr. Mayor, I've disclosed 3.7.2 from memory.
Okay, already, yes.
Yep, and
Due to your competing business interest with Aramac Cut Price.
that's right, Mr. Mayor. So I'll declare a prescribed conflict of interest on that item, and I'll be leaving the room.
Councillor Gleeson.
I don't believe so, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Hanson.
I don't believe so, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Arthur.
No, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Plum.
Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Rogers.
And Mrs.
Does any councillor present believe any other councillor present has a prescribed conflict of interest that they may have overlooked disclosure? Being none, declarable conflicts of interest, please, Councillor Peoples.
No, I think I'm right, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Gleeson.
No, not believe so. I mean, no.
No, Mr. Mayor. Councillor.
I don't believe so, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Hart.
No, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, just previous, I have a great conflict of interest in project program 3.42 because of the sculpture trail, and also the works report 3.5.1. They're mentioned in that those reports. So
Previously you've dealt with that and we've already given you permission to remain in the room.
So do we need to do that?
No.
Yeah.
Stand in conflict of interest unless councillors present wish to change their intent, which they do not. Does any councillor present believe any other councillor present may have overlooked a declarable conflict of interest? none. Confirmation of minutes for the June meeting, the budget meeting. Can I have somebody move that those minutes be received, please? Councillor Gleeson, seconded Councillor Plum. Those in favour? Motion carried, 7-0. Are there any alterations, errors or omissions that councillors would like to discuss?
I put these in, Mr Mayor. We missed putting in the tender price for that first resolution.
Thank you.
And we were missing the word road there from that item number. And also I had incorrectly recorded the expression of interest for the pool. I put it for 1 year only when it was 3 years with a 2-year option.
Okay, thank you. So with those omissions added, do I have a mover to move the minutes be approved? Councillor Plum. Councillor Hanson seconds. Debate. Those in favour? 7-0. My information reports now. This has been put together directly from my side. The last week when this was being put together, I was extremely busy. I will add to this verbally now. I met 3 times with the Federal Minister for Agriculture, the Honourable Senator Murray Watt, Senator for Queensland. I met with him on the sidelines of the ALGA conference while I was in Canberra. I met with him in Gladstone and I've met with him in Brisbane. In different capacities, he is also the Minister for Emergency Management, which has obviously carriage of things like flood damage. I met in terms of the context of our arrangement with Big Corridors to ensure that funding is maintained under the Albanese government. And I also met around the renewable energy zone here in Barcaldine and its focus on agricultural manufacturing. I have met with the Acting Premier, the Deputy Premier, Minister for State Development and Local Government here in Barcaldine last week. I met with Madeline King, the Honourable Madeline King, Minister for Northern Australia and Resources. I met with her on 2 separate occasions in Gladstone and here last week. So there have been a number of, in my trips around an activity related to those meetings, there have been a number of meetings as recently as yesterday. The Western Queensland Regional Community Forum that's outlined as an event entailed a visit from the Assistant Minister for Local Government, Nikki Boyd, Minister for Transport and Main Roads, Mark Bailey, and the Minister for Social Housing and a whole host of other things, but her predominant reason for involvement here is housing, the Honourable Minister Leanne Enoch. So that's what I've been doing. The correspondence going out. You'll see there a letter to Inspector Julia Cook. The letter isn't attached, but I'll forward it to you, but I'll summarise it here now. I have been in discussions with Inspector Cook regarding convening a roundtable in Barcaldine on community safety, focusing on 4 key themes: road safety and general traffic awareness, drug and alcohol violence, community events, and domestic violence. There's a number of reasons for the roundtable other than that 4. We have had a bit of a turnover in officers in charge. We also, especially here in Barcaldine, but we've got some junior officers in various outlying stations who haven't really had an opportunity to engage with stakeholders of council. I've invited the Department of Transport and Main Road and the Office of Liquor and Gaming to that roundtable as well for their specific sections on it. So thinking around community events for Officer of Liquor and Gaming and also for TMA, it's the general road safety stuff. My hope out of this first roundtable, and along with the inspector, is that we just have a really good open communication channel established with people like the Director of Works and the various OICs in the event that our local staff in, say, Aramac or Jericho are unavailable. The OICs in those stations know who in our organisation to get in contact with. They've worked with them in a boardroom setting. But also there's a number of issues that QPS have raised with me around speed signs, town entrance treatments that would be really good to have a crash out with TMR at the same time. And in my conversations with our OCs, it may not be as publicly known as people are aware of, but the drug and alcohol violence and crime, drug and alcohol crime, is substantial enough that it warrants a little bit of a considered response to what appropriate things we can put in place. Why council and police, you might say? Well, when you bring Office of Liquor and Gaming in, we own all of the facilities predominantly where community events are held, and there could be quite possible design initiatives that can be incorporated into our licensed areas that council may be able to undertake to save temporary fencing, for one example, or the design of our liquor service areas, the exclusion of children from those areas are all things that, if we can get some consistency on across the council area, it allows us to then provide really good advice and more modern facility opportunities to our community groups and lessen the chance of them getting in trouble. So it's about being proactive, getting on the front foot, having OLGR and police all hearing a consistent message from each other and us as the interface for that. Inspector Cook and I are not certain about how the roundtable will manifest into the future, but we're thinking once a year, pull that group together. If we identify a common road safety issue, we can then work on a public information campaign about that, whether it's speeding, whether it's caravan usage, whether it's heavy road train usage. And I'm very aware of other councils that have developed a good TV campaign around be aware of oncoming heavy vehicles, leave the road, that sort of stuff. Watch out for wildlife, don't overtake in the dust, all of these sort of things. We're hopefully going to be sealing our dirt road network very quickly, very shortly. But we're still going to have these ongoing issues. So that will be held here on the 2nd of August, and all the OCs will be involved in that. So it won't be just Julie and I, we're going to co-chair that. Shane's going to bring a lot of the senior staff together for that as well, so that they can develop that operational relationship. We'll have a communique come from that to discuss the key themes that were, highlight the key themes that were discussed, but there'll be a very detailed set of minutes recorded that will go direct to councillors and hopefully help inform operational stuff, but also strategic capital investment, whether it be on roads or community facilities, parks, gardens, that sort of stuff. So that's what that is in relation to. You may start to hear about it if you know any of your local police officers, because their invitations will be sent from the inspector very shortly. That's me. Questions, please.
Through Mayor, for councillors to attend that round table meeting.
We're just waiting to physically see how many people are coming in terms of how we can manage the day, and then yes, we'll throw it open for councillors to come and. Councillor People?
No, I'm good with it, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Police?
Mr Mayor, with your meetings, the wild dog update, can you just enlighten us a little with that, please?
So I met with the chair of the pest management group. On the 1st of July. One of the things that's happened of late that the chair is concerned about is that the state have pulled the funding for the wild dog coordinator, who was the executive officer of QDOG, the group known as QDOG. And with that funding being pulled, no one's collating the data around wild dog numbers as they're being captured, so either trapped, shot, however. So there's the picture has been lost since about late 2019, realistically, even though the officer was winding down. The chair believes that the numbers are approaching 2015 levels again. The last sort of period of wet fences have had some maintenance issues, cluster fences have had some maintenance issues. So he's generally worried about that. He's worried about the interface with town commons with dogs in areas where it's difficult to fence due to creeks. So part of what he was looking for was whether council could
put together a survey. He was concerned that it wouldn't be taken up by big numbers, but whether council could put together a survey monkey, which obviously is a virtually a free service, and just distribute the link to landholders and ask them to fill in whether they've been capturing dogs, where, how many, what the density of dogs are. He was concerned that council had shrunk its budget. I relaxed those concerns by saying that because we have a cost recovery budget now, the expenses aren't huge and income not, that there's a net. So we're budgeting to lose around 65,000 on wild dogs, when there's expenses there that we just don't have access to charge on. I did tell him that I'd look further into that and haven't to this stage have a chance to do that. So he was just. We did also have a conversation about the future of that committee and the need for it. I said to him that we'd had discussions here about the future of the need for all of that. I've also had some discussions at Rapid, at Central West Pest Management Group, around their respective wild dog advisory groups. It's probably a little preempting just yet, would be my advice, to disband those committees, because there is some evolving threats. But I did say to him that we really want to reinvigorate the involvement of people in his committee. So I suggested to him that he travel with us when we do our community consultation, and especially for the rural leg of each day. And he was keen to do that, to talk up the work of the committee and what the zones are and who their rep is, depending on where we meet. You know, if we go to the lake and meet, well, he could say, well, you three are the reps and we don't see you at the meeting, and because realistically, as both of you councillors would know, there's only about 5 or 6 out of the 15 zones that are actually active in representation at the meeting. So he was pragmatic about the future as well. If the buy-in's not there, then they're all wasting their time. I did suggest in putting together the questions for the survey that they also focus on weeds. Not asking for weeds that are endemic. No good asking Councillor Gleeson about your do you have prickly acacia, just like it's no good asking me, do you have Parthenium weed, but asking for producers and landholders to take stock of whether there's any new infestations of a particular weed, so that we can feed that work into Desert Channels Queensland, but also into the broader Central West Pest Management framework. At the last Central West Pest Management Group meeting, there was a discussion around, and subsequent to that, I've received advice from one of our RLOs, and I'm having discussions with the CEO about the use of a different software package for our local laws officers and RLOs to use, because the current system's not compatible with other council areas. So there's a system known as ESRA, which requires a licence and so forth, but it would be really good for RLOs to input directly into the things like wild dog sightings, disease incursions on stock routes and public rights of way, weed incursions. So that was the context of the conversation generally. We had a really open discussion. He's hoping to have a meeting before we do the community consultation in November, if that is what council chooses to do it, which will narrow that down. I've told him that the best time to get that survey information out is for us with the rates notice. So it'll hopefully be in the next few weeks that he'll be distributing some draft survey questions to the group for some discussion, and then they'll come back to council and we'll vet them and send them out. Thank you. Any other questions?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, what was the date for that possible roundtable with the police and liquor and gaming?
The 2nd of August.
And further to Councillor Gleeson's question about the wild dogs, do we capture, like, when scalps come in, do we ask what property or area?
Yeah, we do.
Right.
But we usually just get a drop pin in the middle of someone's property.
Yeah, not as specific, it's, especially with some of the larger properties.
Yeah.
Right.
One thing I did talk, on that, and that is a very good point. We do have a couple of, not many, but we have a couple of active private trappers in the region. I'm going to seek with Paul to have a chat to them. One of them traps my that they could do better, like a photograph of where their trap is has a GPS point on it, which can be relayed. So just going to have a chat to them. I know old trappers have got a bit of they don't like giving away their spots, but where they're being engaged privately, You know, in my case, I'm physically paying the trapper to be there. They're not a council employed trapper or so where we've got those trappers that are active, if we can capture that information, it really would be a good guide for the RLOs, especially when they're, so today, Alpha is still the predominant 1080 beta. The baits have really dropped off here. Now, that has been affected by wet weather. The dates were in and around the rain. So I'm hoping that's an aberration, but the chair, Paul, is very worried about a bit of apathy settling in. Now the fences are up and not up in some cases, and so we're just going to have to watch that with him and with that committee over the next 12 months or so to check that people are still using all available tools to minimise the threat, because otherwise the investment in the fences is awful.
Through you, Mr Mayor, the Western Queensland Regional Community Forum, did you attend that?
I did. That was
What
yesterday.
was there anything that came out of
It was an interim step. So there was some conversation around social housing, which we've also got some correspondence further on that uniquely presents us, and I'll discuss then. There was also some conversation around infrastructure, social and hard infrastructure. They've been developing a plan, an action plan of what things are low-hanging fruit and which are medium-term and which are long-term. A number of that plan, they're trying to now progress pigeonholing projects that they've got across the Central West. One of which is the bike trail from here to Arabic. Another is the progressive sealing of dirt roads, which obviously we've already got on our radar. Water policy was discussed significantly and freeing up of water. So there was no concrete outcome from that meeting, but it wasn't the meeting for that. It was about developing the plan that will guide, be the map for state government involvement in Western Queensland. There was a really strong understanding that water needs to be something more than just locked away. It's the building blocks for economic development. So there was also some conversation around health and the improved access to cable or data, bigger data width to enhance health outcomes. Not purely telehealth, but health monitoring for people in their own homes. So that was also discussed by some representatives from Tampa. And also skills-based training. What are the roadblocks to skill-based training being developed locally? How do we attract people? How do we retain them around those jobs and skills? We heard from Rapid Skilling and Rescue on that. So yeah, it was good. It was good, but it still just seems to be teasing out things that we know, but it's a matter of getting them articulated in a way that policy setters in Brisbane can develop policy to counteract. Can I have somebody move my report be received, please? Councillor Peoples, seconder. Councillor Gleeson. Those in favour? Sorry, any more questions? All right. If you're indulgent, I'd like to now move the mayoral minute, please. I will move it, but I'll discuss. I think it's self-explanatory, and councillors, I did circulate it, not as a formal notice of motion, but for your information and awareness that it was coming today. I did circulate this on Saturday. The threat is real. We are not the front line for maintaining or excluding this disease from Australia. However, we are the front line for agriculture. The impact of this in our region would be catastrophic for the local economy. I think that it is incumbent. This is a moment in time when all three levels of government need to put aside their political differences and work together. I've been extremely impressed with the work of the federal government to date on this. It was raised by the Prime Minister in his very first bilateral face-to-face meeting with the Indonesian Prime Minister. as in what resources were required to assist on the ground. I've been in contact with the Chief Veterinary Officer and the Queensland designated lead. Alison Cook is the Chief Vet in Queensland, and Ted Parrish is the designated internal DAF lead. I delayed the meeting start this morning to take his phone call. There is a coordinated response around messaging being developed. That will be finalised in Canberra on Tuesday of next week, which will allow for consistent messaging from all levels of government, all sectors of the agricultural industry. The biggest gap here that I see is if I asked 80% of producers, and I'm being generous, what are the symptoms of foot and mouth disease, I don't think they can tell you. And people undertake travel with free abandon again at the moment, and that's great. That is seeing our economies and the world economies recover from COVID. But a farmer landing back in Brisbane sees a warning sign about a farm, that's fine. They land back in their hometown and see a warning sign about the impacts, and it just might be that final trigger for, oh yeah, I wore my shoes somewhere I didn't remember when I was coming through customs, I'll drop them in the bin. And we'll have, conversations with DAF and Biosecurity Australia about the appropriateness of storage receptacles for suspected contaminated material. My focus, other local governments have got a focus around training for our RLOs, which has been secured as of yesterday, around what their role will be in an outbreak and how they will help. I think we need to start at the beginning though and work to not let it into the country. And so there's the stuff at the airport that's referenced here, but then also subsequent to that, distribution via all of our communication channels, be it the Gazette, Facebook, Instagram, website, email to offices, that all of our offices have got established email chains around what are the symptoms and who do you contact in the event that you have a suspicious symptom in one of your livestock. I think that information is critical. We are best placed to get that directly into the hands of producers. So that is why I believe this to be urgent. Point B, we'll discuss as A and B. Point C there, the emergency allocation of funds. This is really I don't think there'll be extra funds needed to what we've already adopted in the budget, other than a recognition that if our RLOs were to be committed to a full-time response, they won't be working in one area, they'll be working purely in a biosecurity area. I don't know what funds will be needed. I don't know if any will be needed, but I just included C so that the officers could bring back to the next meeting a line item for the budget as I was going to say slush fund, but as a funding weighting that things can be costed to in the event that our RLOs, and it will be used probably straight away because the RLOs are going to need to undertake this training. Their wages for the day that they're at training will have to be costed to something. So whether it's costed to just a general training account or the fact that we are identifying specifically in our budget a response mechanism that the CEO has at his discretion to use. It's symbolic because I think everybody in this room knows that if we were to get a confirmed case in the Buckwater Council area, that there'd be no objection to the CEO using any and all resources that are required to assist with the isolation of that property and whatever steps are necessary. But I think symbology is important because the broader public at the moment are being a little bit divided around government's responses, and I think we need to send the signal that needs to be shelved, and governments are all working very hard, including ours at a local level, to ensure that the threat posed to agriculture here is minimised, if not completely eliminated. With that very strong dialogue, I move my mayoral minute, call for a seconder. Councillor Gleeson, now discussion or amendment. Councillor Penkins, you have a point you'd like to raise?
Just in dot point A, Mr Mayor, you've got returning visitors to Indonesia, should be from?
Yes. Well, I mean, probably if we're wordsmithing it, we need to probably take returning out and put by visitors from to Indonesia, which covers the locals, or, you know, in the event that we have an Indonesian visit our region. So,
Just to all from.
yeah, to or from, by visitors to or from Indonesia. Is that your only concern?
No, that's fine, Mr.
No other issues? Councillor Gleeson?
Mr Mayor, just a little bit ironic how over the weekend we there was a few country persons having a discussion, and there was a local person said, you know, this airport at Barcaldine, it's just anybody can just land there at any hour of the night, and there's no security, and he was going on, and then he mentioned foot and mouth disease, and I said, I just looked at him and I didn't know anything. I didn't say anything about it, but I just looked at him and I thought, my goodness, and we were discussing it, riding around on a horse, discussing this exact problem over the weekend, and it could be a huge one.
There's no security at the Long Ridge Airport in the hall. No scanning or anything getting on the plane.
No, that won't help anyway because it's only returning.
No, but I'm just saying there's nothing at the Long Ridge Airport, right? It's making step, I think, yeah.
For you, Mr Mayor, it's only domestic planes that can land, like an international plane can't just come and land,
Not legally, no.
like legally.
No.
It should only be domestic planes.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because there's no customs. There's no customs board here.
Thank you.
Okay, in that case, I call the vote. Those in favour? Motion is carried. Councillors, it was remiss of me in my report, because Councillor Arthur was going to raise it today, so I should have raised it then. You may have seen last night the Tree of Knowledge lights have been changed to red and white out of respect for former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, or in Japanese, Abe Shinzo. His funeral is today-ish sometime. We will probably for the remainder of tonight, possibly tomorrow night, keep the lights bathed in red and white, the tree bathed in red and white. A true friend of Australia in more ways than just security dialogue, was instrumental in several trade-related impasses being lowered. A substantial friend to Australia. So I asked if that could happen from yesterday on your behalf. Councillor Arthur was going to raise also a...
Mr Mayor, I was just about to remind you whether we should make mention of the passing.
So when it comes to the back end of the meeting, I think we probably will. Your suggestion from yesterday is probably correct. 331. Report from the CEO.
Councillors, I've just placed on you, in front of you there, summary of my last month, a little bit in review. Generally, part of when I started, we talked about the 360-degree review and how I do that. That was about visiting sites, visiting our workplaces, talking to community. So that's been full on in the last month or so. I put a bit of a list down of the places that I've attended just to get a good feel for the region, from the Metabara Stock Show right through the Alpha races. One thing I noticed, there's a lot of very proud residents of their community, more than happy to contribute what we do well, what we can improve on, which is encouraging that they've come forward and shared their views. Always welcoming, haven't had any trouble with meeting with people and having a chat, which is appreciated. Talking to several managers and supervisors, trying to get an understanding from both our district managers and our team leaders and supervisors what their day-to-day operations are like, having a look at their systems and processes. Gone out to some job sites to actually see our staff operating for more than one reason. One is obviously to have a look from a safety perspective, how we do our work, but equally to give them a voice as well, to actually meet the CEO and have the confidence to share. That's happened so far and quite well. One thing that's we've become a little bit complacent around is COVID again. We've had a number of staff contract COVID. As per the example, Alpha races, We had a few out at the Alpha Races, we had a few at the golf, but it does impact our workforce significantly where we've had quite a few out and away for a period of time. One thing I'd note is that our staff, when it comes to filling the gaps and stepping up, they've done an excellent job, so they're more than happy to support and cover. So I'd just like to thank them. When we had a bit of a look from HR perspective, we've had a few resignations, we had 4 of them, but we've also advertised 13 roles, so we're starting to get some momentum. We're a bit short in the HR space, that's why we're lagging at that point. On the second page of the report there, I talked about what the focus has been. The gaps that I've noticed really quickly, obviously we had to get the end of the financial year done. We're now looking at delivering on this year's budget. We've got some gaps with HR, obviously. I'd like to look at our governance, our procurement, our projects as my next efforts in getting that on track. One thing that I've attached, it's a draft form for councillors to have some input as well. One thing I've noticed is with our reporting is I'd like to be able to provide council a business improvement or analysis or a project analysis from inceptions right through to who it affects, how it affects our budget, how we communicate it, which comes right to the end of how we fund it and how I report back to council as a bit of a tool for not just councillors but for our staff in scoping out our projects and delivery. I'd ask councillors to take that away and have a look. Open for some comment on that one. We'll also be sharing with our managers. The other one we need to talk about is obviously CA negotiations were underway before I got here. I'd like to see that completed as soon as possible. Which CA? Our EB.
Certified.
Sorry, I've got a cranky voice. So I'm sounding a bit like Barry White for some. Others not. We're having a very close look at our plant and fleet, asset management, and we're also looking at some contract management. So the next month is prepare for the bush councils and continue with my visits out to meet the rest of the staff on the ground. So in a summary, it's been a fairly active 6 weeks and I've enjoyed every minute of it.
Can I have somebody first move that we receive that report? Councillor Plum, second Councillor Peoples. Those in favour? 7-0. Questions, please. I will, it won't, it's not, Shane and I discussed his report, it wasn't in the agenda. Last week with the sudden visit from the acting Premier and the Minister for Resources, in fairness to Deb, I don't know how the agenda even got out. We were absolutely smashed executing our roles in hosting high-level dignitaries. So the agenda was compiled before Shane had a chance to get that report together, otherwise it could well have been in there. Apologies that you're receiving it tabled today, but not really, because there was no other way that we could have done it.
It's not the norm, it'll normally be in your reporting with a lot more detail as well.
Hence why my report went in there without me reading it as well, so, or adding to it other than verbally today. Questions?
Through you, Mr Mayor,
That's certified agreement, the EB.
was that meant to be ready to be signed off on? That was ready to be signed off on. So.
Not yet. What I'll ask is when we finish here, we have a session with the councillors to discuss the process.
And it hasn't gone to the vote yet. The staff haven't voted on it yet either.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I was actually going to make a comment that we got the agenda a day early, but it was Thursday, no, but because we've moved our meeting forward to the Tuesday, we're still getting the same amount of time now that Tim, we got it on Thursday afternoon, which I was appreciative of.
I do commend Debbie and officers for getting it out that day early, because I thought the camp draft had started a day early. The whips were cracking around here on Thursday like you wouldn't believe. So, but anyway, it was all secured. Councillor Plum.
Thank you, Shane, for your report. Is there any way we can have sort of an update through the week by Friday from Shane as to what's happening on the week? Through the week? Just a weekly
update?
just a weekly update by Friday as to what's happening.
Just my email what I've done for the week.
Yeah. Just to give us a little bit of information
Yeah.
as to what's happening on the weekend if there's something request.
Don't mind.
Yeah, thank you.
And one thing, Mr Mayor, it's a HR question. With regard to our resignations, do we do any form of an exit interview to see why staff are leaving? Is it a better opportunity or an issue with work or,
We will be, it hasn't been done.
Yeah, just to capture that information.
I want to know that myself.
Yeah.
Why we've got movement and where it's going, so.
Yeah.
At the moment, we've got one lady doing HR.
Yeah,
The gentleman, so that was a discussion about HR that
Yeah.
we got some gaps in.
Councillor Hanson. Councillor Gleeson.
I'm right, thank you.
That's all good.
I'm right, Mr Mayor.
Anything else? Anything else, Councillor? Right. 3.2, Councillor Information Correspondence.
Council, take it as read, there's a number of letters that have come in. We can just talk to each one if we need to, or if the council's read their agendas. It's mostly information.
One thing I would recommend for you, pages 10 and 11, the 2-page brief on the renewable energy zone, is ridiculously light on detail. But if you're ever asked in conversation, what is the BREZ? That's the best summary you'll be able to give somebody. And it's obviously now a public document. You can share that with people to your heart's content. So,
Let's go on this.
it's not probably yet, because it's not our bread, It's probably best that information like this goes once the joint entity is formed on a website under their cover, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But I'm more than happy for people to for this to be reproduced for people. Like if people come into your shop and ask, "What's this bread that I'm hearing all about?" Go back here. That's what it is.
That's what I mean, it's,
You want me to send it separately, Mr Mayor, to everyone so that they've got it as a separate document?
Yep. The only commercially sensitive business inclusion has been the names removed. So you'll note the second dot point on page 11 is protected horticulture. The name of the business is not in there because that's commercially in confidence. The rest of all of it is open source information. That's been provided through a number of, it's more than 2 pages. It's 4 pages, I'm sorry, from page 10 to 13, but page 13 is only my signature. That's been provided to the highest levels of government. The social housing report on page 14, item 4. We are one of about 5 or 6 local governments left as a registered social housing provider. A discussion yesterday in here with Mark Wall from the Department of Housing, responsible for social housing investment. That basically means that as a registered provider, they can just drop them in whatever figure of money we want to us to build social housing. Now, social housing is exactly what it says. You have to be a registered social housing recipient, so you've got to meet their criteria for social housing, maximum income threshold, maximum assets threshold, all of those things. But there are a number of people that obviously currently qualify within our council area for social housing and could quite well, if there was more available. It's a chicken and egg scenario. A lot of people that have lived in a community for a long time know exactly what social housing is available, and they know that there's none empty, so they don't apply until literally someone moves or dies. So there's not a great big waiting list in an office in Emerald, but in the community it could be. And one of the other benefits out of that is if we wanted to build housing for ourselves, we could co-share the costs with social housing. So if, for example, we wanted to build 6 units, condo type units, and say 4 of them were for social housing and 2 were for our use or community use, there's shared costs. So obviously social housing pays for 4 and we pay for 2, but there's a common wall, there's a common soil test, there's a common DA process, there's a common procurement process that would lower the cost to build for council that social housing would wear. So Mark's going to do a little bit more work and come back to Shane And we will have to have that conversation about what our intent is around housing. But we are in a unique situation as a registered provider of social housing that we can be direct funded, no need for ministerial, there's a pocket of money sitting there that we can build social housing in all 5 of our towns at the government's expense, which was a very good conversation to hear. Now, what that means for us, I've been very upfront. There's a lot of hysteria, and I don't use that word lightly, around this housing crisis that's facing Western Queensland. There's a lot of armchair experts. I've said at every meeting that I'm a part of it with that we need to tread very carefully as a government, as a region, and I don't necessarily think the answer is just rushing a big heap of new home builds into Western Queensland, because I think overnight we destroy the superannuation of hundreds of aged pensioners and limit their access to aged care drastically, because the only asset that they own is their own house. So we've got to improve access to housing without devaluing drastically whole sectors of our housing stock that our ratepayers own. Mark Wall, for what it's worth, agrees with that position, but sees a number of opportunities for us to invest in that social housing space without having a detrimental impact on existing. We can leverage that. The exciting opportunity for us could be that if we leverage the build of a social house or housing for social income support, if we leverage that to build something for ourselves, in a community such as Muttaburra, where we've got very limited access to housing for staff, in Barcaldine even. Actually, we've got the same access in Barcaldine that we do in Muttaburra, precisely, not much. So that's options that we can seriously consider, and it was good advice to receive.
Mr. Mayor, with your comment about people have an understanding of social housing and don't request it or don't go on the list of it until they know there's a vacancy. Like on page 15, we've said that council confirms there is no demand for social housing assessment in Jericho, Alpha, Aramac and Muttaburra. Does that still stand then?
So the advice that I just gave you came direct from the department yesterday, that they are aware that people register the minute a vacancy becomes available. Officially, the case is that there's no demand because there's not a waiting list. That's the so that's what they're saying. There's an official point of view where you look at a list and there's no one on it, but they know that the department's aware of the minute a vacancy becomes available, and we would see that in Alpha, in the low income housing in Alpha, like the minute a person moves out, moves on, there's an application to move straight in there, isn't there? Like that. It hasn't been a vacant unit there in my lifetime, I don't reckon. Well, if it is, it doesn't last very long. We've got to fix something before someone moves into it. So,
yes and no.
Yes and no would be that's right. I didn't know that until yesterday at the regional community forum, where it was the department were very clear, and the minister herself had high visibility of it. She said, we know that people don't apply in small regional settings until they know there's a house available. Because it used to be, you went on a list and you just progressed up the list. Now they triage your application. So to quote the minister from yesterday, if you are a single parent with 3 children on disability support, you go straight to the front of the list. Doesn't matter how many people and how long they've been on the list. Whereas if you're a single income, no disability pension individual with no dependents, you keep getting pushed down the list. Whereas that wasn't the case. It used to be very hierarchical. As you went on, as someone went off the list, you got promoted one run. So they call it a register now. That's correct. Yeah, it's a register.
So if you take it as, from a statistician perspective, there's no one applying, so there's no need. Where in actual fact there is, but people just haven't applied because they haven't worked out how to do that. So.
Plus, it's 96% of Queenslanders are not eligible for social housing. Obviously, that would not be the case it wouldn't be 96% of Barcaldine Regional Council residents, but But the interesting statistic is that it's very hard to qualify for it. That was the minister.
Yeah.
Quite the minister again, this was her words yesterday, 96% of us are not eligible for it.
So, Mr Mayor, can I just go on a bit further with that? On page 14, I think it is, you've got draft meeting notes there. If you're okay to stay on this housing, can I?
Yeah, this is for your information, yeah.
It's got that the attendance at the meeting was CEO and Deborah, and then the people from the housing community. But when you go down to page 15, I think this is what Dan just spoke about, social housing demand investment in Jericho, Alpha Aramac and Muttaburra. There's no demand for social housing investment in these towns.
This meeting was triggered by them. They rang up for a chat.
Okay.
So that's where this is coming from, their stats.
But that's not our position, eh?
No, that's the stats they had.
That's the stats they had, that's not our, that's okay.
And it's the stats we have, officers, would I be right? We don't have people coming into our office asking for social housing. No. Damien? Jenny? So we know they're there, like was said in the forum. Somewhere out there we know they're there, but we don't have formal visibility of them, if you know what I mean. There's not people lining up with us asking for social housing, like on the definition of social housing, not housing. We're aware there are people demanding housing, but social housing is that 4% of Queenslanders that qualify.
Well, I had a fellow see me yesterday about social housing who's living in a caravan, I think in a caravan park, and I'm pretty sure he qualifies for social housing. So, and like you say, they're not registered.
They're not registered. They can register, I'm pretty sure, online.
Yeah.
They don't even have to visit a Queensland government office to do it. So, put them in touch with their officers and we can put them in touch with social housing.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I think they can do that through the QGAP office in Aramac.
Yeah, they probably can, but does anyone do it? That's their problem, I think.
No one is doing it, no. But we could steer them there, though, is what you're saying, Paul.
If you're aware of it.
But I just, because Shane and Debbie were at this meeting, I just, making sure that that's not our stance on that social housing demand and investment in Jericho, Alpha Aramac and Muttaburra. There's no demand for social housing investment in those towns. That's not our position, that's all.
This was purely generated by them.
Yeah, and the other thing they meant by that was that they don't currently have any housing in those places, and there's no land available either to be able to build, but they were looking at that option as to whether there would be land available.
But there'll be subsequent meetings to actually work with us to find out what's available. The council's involved.
No, I think after Mark, who's senior to all three of them, his meeting with us yesterday, like his assistant, DG level, his meeting and offer yesterday to build here if council is of a mind to support it.
Yeah.
I think there'll be some traction around this area.
Okay.
Yeah. The question for council from a cost perspective is, do we want to build at the same time? We can build this social housing at no cost to council. But it's also it's of limited use to council from a housing stock perspective. Is what I should require, because we can buy the houses at any time, as we're attempting to do, but then and use them for what we want. But there's a 20-year, it's a capital grant. We
have to manage it for that.
That's right. So if we want to leverage this bill, that's probably the opportunistic thing for council to consider over the next period of time. Is do we want to apply for social housing to be built? If we do, how much of it and where? And then subsequent to that, do we want to leverage the build to build non-social housing for our own use? And how much money have we got to do that? They're the questions.
I suppose the general discussion too is the model they used to do about building bricks and mortar and expensive houses and looking at alternates. So whether it's unit style or whether it's the mountable style, there was a general, they're open to all ideas that suits each community, but they want to work with us, the council, to find out where we're at with it too. So it was a good start.
I think any opportunity you've got when you stock into any of our towns is beneficial to those towns. So yes, I'd be definitely interested going down the track when we have another down the table here.
Through you, Mr Mayor, so these notes, social housing notes, did they already have that information that there was no available supply of buildings in the area? Because there's 4 at least here, I know of 6 builders in our.
That was what they thought, and we did provide that information to them.
Yeah.
That there was builders available, even though they're often very busy, but there is local builders. We did tell them that, yes. That was their, as
This is their
Councillor
views.
People says, that was their opinions of the current situation.
And the number of factory solutions that are coming into town, that I spoke to real estate agents about that. They said that's not because of the not availability of builders, it's because with the cost of building through COVID, it's just a more economical decision to put one of those and have a builder. It's not because they didn't have a builder available.
So I talked to three property owners in Alpha that are installing Westbuilt. 2 have got them in, 1 already, and the other one's arriving this week. They couldn't get a builder for 3 years to build them a house. They went that way on the basis that was the only way they could get one. So I think it might be a bit of a hybrid, and I think depending on where you are in the council area.
Yeah, I'm talking about the park itself.
This talks about the whole council area though as well,
Yeah.
The builders for rural jobs are very hard to find because they can find the same job in town without the travel. Jericho's, there's a number of, so there was a house purchased in Jericho by a rural person purely to accommodate the builders to build their house.
And I'd just like to say that I really firmly agree with Councillor Peoples about the need for social housing in all of those towns. We should try probably to get people informed that they need to get on the list so that it's there, the data's there. But I've also asked just about the regional director providing advice regarding the approval of advice on housing in Alpha and Jericho, and that was yesterday.
Have we got that advice yet?
No.
That's down the bottom, page 2.
Yeah, no, it's still early. It was just those discussions.
So we still haven't, that's the houses that we've offered to buy for 280,000. I asked Mark yesterday, he hasn't even briefed up on it yet, so it's probably 3. He briefs his DG, the DG will then brief his. So there's still, he hasn't settled on where he is at with it yet.
So the 3, Mr Mayor, they're listed as council owned, so there must be somebody who must have that little bit of information.
He was very sceptical yesterday. But I couldn't read him.
No.
Some of those houses are some of those backwater houses and Amberley houses, Paula.
No, this is just all the retirement units, 8 ones up in the hospital and the ones down in the main street.
Oh, it's okay.
They're the ones we've asked to buy, and they're listed there as council owned.
Once council owns them, then they no longer, there's no longer a requirement for you to qualify for social housing to use them.
But some of those houses from Blackwater and Amberley, they regard those as social housing too, didn't they?
Yeah, we purchased those things, so they're not on their social housing list anymore.
Merrimack Council moved them in. They had nothing to do with it.
Did we talk about buying those units the previous time?
We've made an offer for 280.
We haven't actually purchased them yet that we're aware of.
No, we definitely haven't, we still got the money.
Looks like they've agreed with us.
Yeah, that's one.
It's probably just
They may have agreed at the lower level, but they certainly haven't signed off on it at the senior level yet, so I wouldn't consider them ours until we get the letter.
Boss wasn't quite aware of it yesterday.
No, he wasn't saying a thing.
Okay,
There was another note in there about a native title claim, just for advice for us. This believes they
an
have it.
extinguishment of native title. Yeah,
So we're not, obliged to do anything.
they're just legally obligated under the Act
Just
to
tell us it's
provide us the visibility that it's proceeding. This will happen, there's going to be a number of these councillors over the next 6 to 12 months because I'm aware of about 12 or 13 other applications for transition to freehold. One of the requirements to transition from leasehold land to freehold is that either a native title agreement or the extinguishment of native title. Because there are very different legal obligations on a landholder under a leasehold land arrangement with respect to native title to what there is with freehold. So this has taken a very long time to get to this point. I'm aware of when this application was first lodged. So the ones that are being lodged over the last 6 to 12 months are probably 12 to 14 months away from getting to this stage. But yes, you're right, it's a no action required.
Just for notice. Any other last ones, Crime Stoppers?
Yeah, I just put that in for you councillors, it's a FYI, but it's an important FYI, I guess.
Through you, Mr Mayor, there seems to be a bit of a rash of late night antisocial behaviour in Barcaldine in the last month or so. Roofs being rocked and a little bit of property damage and incursions into the school.
I spoke with Officer in Charge, Sergeant John McPhail last week, and we're meeting when, Debbie? Formally. Tomorrow?
No, they've cancelled it because they said they'd caught up with you.
Oh, okay. We did for an hour and a half, but I thought we were doing it again. They're aware of a number of the perpetrators. There's a couple of formal steps around grievance that they're working through.
Yep.
We did have a discussion around CCTV camera installation in key areas, and he was impressed to know that we did have it at the rec park because he was concerned that was the next potential target. But there will be an ongoing conversation, should it not abate, about what council can do and in terms of lighting and cameras.
Because some of it has included a little bit of damage or minor damage to some council stuff too, as they do.
Some painted graffiti in the park here that I'm aware of.
Yeah, a
Bit
few
of other stuff, Jenny?
social sort of
Yeah.
behaviours which we've got to clean and
To you, Mr Mayor, there has also been incidents at the Globe Tower on 2 occasions. That's why the gate is now padlocked, and if people want access at night, they have to get it. They're actually prizing open the doors of the lift, which they've done on 2 occasions. The first time was they used it as a public toilet, but there just seemed to be, we're not sure what damage that has done, but there has been some evidence retrieved from that site because they let off overall 4 fire extinguishers now. They expelled the fire extinguishers and everything, so yeah, that has happened 2 weekends in a row.
Confidence from parents of being involved now as well. Okay, 333 please, the planning and development.
excuse me,
Do I
Mr.
have somebody
Chair,
move that we receive the CIC please? Councillor Peoples, Councillor Plum, those in favour?
Yeah, sure.
Carried. 7 in favour. 7-0.
the next one's an update from rural planning about rural planning. There's an update, just take those being read.
Questions, councillors?
So, through you, Mr Mayor, it's an odd month not to have a new application.
It is. Everyone's hitting reset for the start of the new financial year.
Quite possibly taking stock and it's been healthy every other month.
I could just say we have had discussions with locals looking at development. So we've had some inquiries and we've worked with rural planning to see how that can happen. It's early days for those ones yet, but there is a lot of interest from locals as well.
Somebody move that we receive that report, please. Councillor Arthur, seconded Councillor Plum. Those in favour? Carried. Right. Councillors, the delegations register has not been touched since 2018.
You've jumped ahead there, sorry.
I missed one.
Missed 334.
You missed, Morgan's.
I'm sorry.
334.
Sorry, Economic Development Report.
Just an update from,
Well, I will talk to this in around the BRES. The meeting last week was not just a talk fest. It was aimed at securing federal government support for the precinct development to match the state government. The mechanics of that are that there are multiple federal opportunities, and it's about how we pick the right one. Minister King is going to talk to her ministerial colleagues about appointing one of them, and probably her, as the champion minister for this, to get it through a funding bucket at a federal level. The state had some concerns around the fact that it's a stage 1, stage 2, that you don't get stage 2 without stage 1, but stage 2 won't come in unless there's certainty of precinct funding. So state development didn't have that, it was Treasury. There's been a discussion around providing the certainty of funding there as well, and that will progress that application through the IPP process much quicker. So the outcome from the meeting last week was that the state is effectively on board. It's just working out the mechanics of how the funding is delivered and over what time frame. The federal government is, the next step with them is how do they get on board? Is it through manufacturing? Is it through renewable energy? Is it through Northern Australia? Is it through, there's a whole host of departments and portfolios that could have carriage of seed capital for it. Minister King is now doing her homework as to where best to lodge an application for that $7.5 million. So that's effectively where we're at with the BRES and why the federal government was here. Although the federal government has very, very specific interest in urea production, because the last domestically produced urea will cease to be produced in December, so Australia will import 100% of its urea. And the three nations that we import, or the three areas of the world that we import urea from are China, Russia and the Middle East. So there's big concern, obviously, at a federal level about that for a whole host of reasons, not least of which is fertiliser for agriculture, but then secondly is explosive production in the resource sector, and third is AdBlue production for the...
That's what I was going to ask about the AdBlue. Yeah, as to, is there a different type of urea for each one?
Urea is urea, and just it gets through various refining processes domestically, sent into either AdBlue or agricultural fertiliser or emulsion for explosive.
So are they considering maybe going down the track?
Oh, most definitely, it's one of the biggest users of the BRES is a urea production.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Green urea they call it, because it's produced using renewable energy. It's a very gas intensive thing to produce. So high non-renewable currently, whereas moving it to a renewable energy for the energy source to create the urea makes it a much more, it lowers the carbon impact of it and allows it to command a premium.
and AdBlue is obviously very short at the moment.
I'm sorry.
Is it still very short, AdBlue?
better than it was.
Yeah.
But it's still, it could go anyway.
It's still horribly expensive. But you can get it. Right. That's it. No? 335.
I just need
Oh, I need a
mover, sorry.
mover. Someone move that. Can we receive the development report, please? Councillor Henson, Councillor Arthur. Those in favour? Carried.
You can see how depth controlled the other moment, can't you? She's very pushy.
Delegations to the CEO are a standard document that's developed by King and Co for LGAQ, but it's periodically updated annually, sometimes twice a year, as specific acts that are delegated from change. So therefore, legally, does the delegation need to change? Now, we adopted in about 2018 the last holus bolus delegations register that was provided by King and Co, which lists literally every delegation that is possible to be delegated under every act of government in Queensland. Now,
Mr Mayor, there's nearly 3,100 on that list.
3,200.
32.
I looked through all 3,200 of them back then, and trying to tease out the ones that are not relevant to our council was impossible. So I understand why the easy option is just adopt a lot, but there is a lot. And you were forwarded digitally yesterday, that register.
It's a large file, so it's a good read.
What we do need to do as part of our governance arrangements is update this register every 6 to 12 months. Because it changes every time an Act of Parliament is passed, almost every time. Because it will tweak sometimes the only thing that changes is the numbers on the front of the delegation, because everything's been pushed down one with the insertion of the clause. But other times there is very specific wording change.
Which shows that we need to be accurate if we need to defend it all. So council needs to delegate the responsibility under the Act to the CEO. Because I'm the new CEO, you need to do that automatically. I need that power then to sub-delegate to my officers as well. So it's a normal process, but it's something that needs to be done so I can operate as a CEO.
Questions, please.
So through you, Mr Mayor, does that transition with a change of CEO or acting CEO, or is it?
It should do. You should delegate the responsibility to the CEO to make decisions on
So it doesn't stay with the position, it stays with the person in the position. So if we have a change of
CEO should review it and then delegate the powers to that CEO when he comes in. So the delegations won't change, but it will be recognised as a CEO.
What about a relieving?
It's only a short-term relieving.
So no need.
No, theoretically we should make recognition. That'll be through a transfer from me to the man who was active along the way, to give them the authority for that period of time back on my phone.
And so does it have to come to council as a resolution too?
For me to appoint someone to act short-term, no. Long-term, you should recognise it, council. There's a lot of responsibilities. Councillor Arthur read through it. There's a lot of responsibilities.
I'd started to and then thought I'll just have a look at how many and scroll down and kept scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and just thought, I don't think it's for individual review, it's...
That's why we have laws.
Well, not for me, not in the 4 or 5 days that we were given.
I think, I don't like it. I didn't like it in 2018 when like honestly, I've got it here somewhere, it's that thick, it's huge. I don't like the fact that it is too big to review. But what else do you, like, it's one of them rare moments in life that you trust your legal advice emphatically. Like, that it's produced by the lawyers through the LGAQ. And it's one of them things that you would assume once it's done right the first time, it's only the updates that, or the lack of updates that lets it fall out of place. So, but I'm in your hands, councillors. I think we do need to do it, but bear in mind you can alter the delegations register at every meeting of council. So if you periodically break off chunks of it and read 500 at a time and want to review something, we can review it every single council meeting. We can bring it up and say, I don't think that should be delegated to the CEO, I think that should be retained.
It's probably a timely reminder then. Like you said, the carte blanche approach of just we approve all of it, that doesn't sit all that easily with me either, but at this stage, if that's our best step to go forward, and then it's a reminder for us to take some time and, as you said, Mr Mayor, have a look at a few areas, and then over time, if we think something's important enough to rein it back or change it, or then that's on us. And if we schedule another review in 6 months or so to, just to keep it.
Theoretically, we do
Yeah.
amendments every 6 months,
Yeah.
definitely every 12 months, depending on the advice. We know that they're currently looking at it now for recent changes.
There's 6 of you, there's 3,200 of them. I'll take 200. If each of you take 500.
That seems fair.
I mean, honestly, a lot of them do not apply. Like there's specific legislation created for First Nations councils, for example. That does clearly not apply, but there's probably 600 delegations that are just meaningless to us, but they're holistically included because not only do they have to operate underneath that framework, they have the other 2,600 to operate under as well. So.
Mr Mayor, I've, like everyone would say, skimmed through these and, just one I've found that I'd like some clarity on is power as a statutory body to borrow money and to seek the Treasurer's approval for the borrowing. So does that give the CEO the actual power to borrow money without council?
No, it's for me to go to the Treasurer and request.
On what we've decided?
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Without the delegation, even if we today adopt a resolution to borrow $1 million to build a bike park.
Yeah.
We then need the interface with the Treasurer to approve that, and that's what that delegation endorses.
It's similar to a council delegate's responsibility to the CEO to negotiate contracts, or as council as a whole can't do the individual negotiations.
Just how it's got chief executive officer, then that comment there beside it just looks like that there's no council involvement. But I don't know if that's how it is, that's fine. I'm sure there's others there like that, but I'm not even sure if I get through my 500.
100 a night, 5 nights in the week. Happy to have a discussion with the head of advocacy for LGAQ about this. He will be here this afternoon.
Bush councils will be here in a couple of weeks.
And the team at King & Co that developed it will be part of the team that are here. So happy for you to each individually approach them and have a discussion around that delegations register and any pitfalls that might have been encountered elsewhere. So with that in mind, sorry.
Through you, Mr Mayor, so we have approved this whole thing in the past.
Yes, we did it in 2018.
Yeah, so there's just a couple of others on here. So none of these, it would be within our budget. Like the CEO, giving the power to the CEO, like there's quite a few here that I feel like he wouldn't be able to do that unless he had approval from us first, the budget.
Correct.
Like there's some of these delegations to do with fluoridating the water. He's got the power to just decide whether we put fluoride in the water or not. Is that him or is it we decide?
It's
To
we
me,
decided,
if we
but
delegate him that decision,
You may be responsible for
I
the
feel,
delivery.
yeah,
we can't then, so we make the decision to fluoridate, for example, but we can't make it happen. That's where the authority is delegated under the Act to the CEO
yeah.
to
So
enforce
it's
a
not
decision
giving
of
him
council.
the delegate, like it's not delegating him to just make decisions.
But that's how something reads, Mr Mayor, sorry.
It does,
Yeah, I mean, that's what, yeah, it's us delegating him to do the job of what we've already decided.
So the way it used to work, yes, so I'll go back a step. The way this used to work before they had a delegations register is after every decision of council, and I'm going way back, like 30 years ago, 40 years ago, you would make a decision and then delegate in the wording of the resolution would be, or a subsequent resolution would be, delegate to the CEO the authority to do that, to undertake that resolution. What this does, this register does, is preempts every possible decision of council that we're allowed to make underneath the Act, as well as a few around industrial relations, HR and workplace health and safety. It preempts the whole lot, puts them into one document, so then when council makes its decisions about fluoridating water, I don't know, buying some piece of plant, budget, all of that, once we make the decision, that there is already implied delegated authority for the CEO to act on our decision. So it's a preemptive register that gives cover on those areas where we don't have visibility, so workplace health and safety, but also it tidies up meeting procedure where we don't need to delegate at every resolution the CEO the power to do that.
The financial delegations come in as well with this. If it is to come back to council.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, it's really, it's the way it's written. Like 187, Chief Executive Officer has the power to issue a building development approval. Like it just doesn't.
But through you, Mr. Mayor, that has to come to council.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying.
But we don't issue
The way this is written.
You don't
it's
issue the
like-
permit.
So it's just it's after we've made the decision, it's not, it's got here, power of an assessment manager to determine whether a building development application complies with the building assessment, and if it does, approve it. I thought they were approved by us.
only impact assessable.
Yeah.
But we approve them. We can't issue the instrumentation. This is the legal cover that triggers the A officer, because we can only delegate to the CEO. That's the other key thing. Like a lot of these responsibilities, the CEO then delegates further down the organisational tree as well. But we have to delegate them first to the CEO before the CEO can pass them on. But there's still limited authority to act outside of a representative council anyway. Which ones have you got there?
Oh, these don't, well, half of these don't apply to us because it's coastal protection management, like, so
Yeah.
really we could just take them all out.
You could, yes.
So it wouldn't be in there for us.
So at the next amendment, council would say, let's remove these from the amendment.
Yeah.
And then the problem is, we think they don't apply, but then we do have Vertigan River.
Say areas that run off.
So we think because we don't have coastal frontage, coastal protection and management doesn't apply. But then all of a sudden there's some piece of legislation passed that says we have to maintain stream flow. So that's why it's dangerous, according to King and Co, to start extracting delegations out, because you assume that they're all there when you need them without going back to look on which ones aren't there and which particular protection do they need.
The fact that they doesn't mean we're going to use them, it just means that we've delegated the responsibility.
It's probably a cost saving measure as well. So King and Co have been able to be charged by the LGAQ to do one delegations register for 76 councils in Queensland, so the City of Brisbane obviously is excluded from this. Whereas if each of us were to seek from King and Co a tailor-made delegations register, we each get a bill for $15,000. Whereas LGAQ probably paid $25,000 on behalf of 76 of us. Which is why all of the irrelevant ones to what we think are included. Happy for you to review it and take out. I'm just I think each time, if you are going to present with the intent to remove, if you can give us plenty of notice so that we can seek advice. If it looks like it could be one of those areas, we can seek whether it's something that should be or should not be removed. But ultimately, it's your decision.
Really, Mr. Mayor, just to understand properly, this is not giving the Chief Executive Officer the power to make those decisions. It's the decisions made, and it's giving him the power to do what we have decided.
It's giving him the legal instrumentation to implement decisions of council within the relative acts that govern Queensland. Except with respect to workplace health and safety and employer obligations, because we have no say over that. And he is, that is purely on the CEO. The CEO is the one that goes to jail, the CEO is the one that carries the can for
It's true, there's about 7 or 8 bits of legislation that can lock me up, but I'd love to take people with me.
Would you? Well, let's just not.
So I don't want to go down by myself.
Mr
So,
Mayor,
but yes, councillor Rogers, you make a very good point. The decision-making power is not delegated here, other than when we choose to delegate that through policy. So in our procurement policy, we delegate decisions around the setting of contracts under the value of 200,000, for example, right? So there's other policies that further water down the decision-making powers of council, or we delegate further. So in our procurement policy, we've delegated down to a stores officers the ability to set money, you know what I mean? So, and that progressively works up in value. There are other policies that we've divested our responsibility in some areas. This register, though, outlines the legal mechanisms that allows the CEO to act on our decisions.
It's an instrument for me to do my job, and then I sub-delegate it as an instrument for other officers.
and Mr Mayor, I think I've had a problem in the past with some of that policy where we used to go down to regards to putting up council plant that's not going to be used anymore to a certain amount, and that was just designated to the authority to the CEO. I know, but that's a policy, that's got nothing to do with this document.
That's correct, and that policy, so one of those delegations in that register in front of you would be allowing, delegating the powers to the CEO to dispose of an asset, right? There'd be something in there,
Yeah.
there'd be some words to that effect. However, our policy is the overarching document that determines how that happens.
Yeah.
So if it's to a certain value, it must go through public tender and public auction, and if it's to this, it must go through. So the instrumentation allows the CEO to do it in accordance with our policy.
No, good.
So this is the trigger, but the policy or the decision of council or the budget, all three of those things are still the overarching framework that the CEO uses these delegations to undertake day-to-day operations. Because ultimately this decision is exactly that, is a decision of council. Do I have a mover? Councillor Peoples, Councillor Hanson. Further debate? Those in favour? 7-0. Morning, team.